Karen,
Yes.
what if everything you thought you knew about life and what comes after turned completely upside down?
I don't even know how to respond to
Well,
that.
what if the mysteries of the soul were less about ghosts in the attic and more about science, love, and, well, someone who knows their way around the afterlife better than you know your way around a GPS?
Well, I like that.
I thought you might. And what if the answer came from someone whose life story is as extraordinary as the question itself?
Then I want to hear that story.
Well, then on today's episode, we are diving deep into the mysteries of the soul, the science of mediumship, and the surprising connections that can change everything you believe about loss, love, and life itself. Stick around, because by the end of this conversation, not only will you have a new perspective on life after death, but you might just find yourself Googling how to become a certified medium tester.
Ooh.
It is a thing. And trust me, you're about to see the world and the universe in an entirely new light. Welcome to the Skeptic Metaphysicians.
My name is Will.
And I'm Karen.
And unlike Mulder and Scully,
we both want to believe.
so we've embarked on a journey of discovery.
We've talked to people deeply entrenched in the spiritual and metaphysical world.
We've thrown ourselves into weird and wonderful experiences. I even joined a coven of witches.
And wait, you joined a coven?
Yep, all in the interest of finding something
Anything.
that will prove that there's something beyond this physical,
three-dimensional world we all live in.
This is the Skeptic Metaphysicians.
Hey there, I'm Will.
And I'm Karen.
And today our guest is Mark Ireland. He's an esteemed author, a spiritual researcher, and the co-founder of the widely acclaimed organization Helping Parents Heal, which supports over 30,000 bereaved parents worldwide. Wow. Now, Mark is the author of two highly regarded books, Soul Shift, Finding Where the Dead Go, and The Persistence of the Soul, both of which explore the profound questions surrounding life after death and a journey of the soul. Now, as the son of renowned mid-20th century psychic Richard Ireland, Mark's life has been uniquely intertwined with the realms of spirituality and mediumship. He's participated in groundbreaking mediumship research studies with institutions like the University of Arizona and the University of Virginia, right down the street. And he now operates a medium certification program, setting rigorous standards for ethical and evidential mediumship. Now, Mark's work bridges the gap between science and spirituality, offering insight, hope, and healing to those seeking answers about the afterlife. Please join me in welcoming Mark Ireland to the show. Mark, how you doing? Nice to be here.
I'm great. I don't know if I'm esteemed or acclaimed, but I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Well, we believe that you are both, so we are thrilled to have you with us. Now, right off the bat, I've got to ask the biggest question that comes to mind. You, in your book, your latest book, you said you've got compelling evidence for life after death, for lack of a better word, right? For communicating with those that have crossed over. What is this compelling evidence that you have found?
But it's really I'd say a body of evidence. I've been mostly focused on the mediumship part of it because that's what I grew up with. That's the father I had. But also, I've met people in other parts of the research community that study near-death experiences and like. So the way I look at it, it's kind of like when you look at all these various things and put them together, they form a mosaic that's highly compelling. I'm not saying it's any one thing. It's the cross-section of evidence between various disciplines, mediumship, near-death experiences, deathbed visitations, reincarnation research, all these things put together. But through my own lens, it's been a lot of direct experiences with mediumship that were very compelling.
Mm.
So when you talk about, these things coming together in the crosshairs, are you looking, when you're doing for the research, are you looking for commonalities?
So first off, I'm not really an official scientific researcher. I'm somebody who grew up with a father who had these abilities. I saw them demonstrated from a young age, and they gave me an inner sense, peace, and kind of like, wow, we're really more than just a body and a brain. And there must be something, part of us that continues on or already existed. And we just spent, part of our lives in this, this body. So having had that experience growing up, I didn't really take path of my father, I was in a much more conventional, streamlined path down getting a college degree and getting married young and having kids. It was really the unexpected passing of my youngest son that drew me back into the field that my father had been in all those years. And so that's how I got engaged with people who do the research and some of these mediums that are some of the top ones in the world. And it's been very rewarding to me, and actually, getting involved in some experiments and also putting together, as you mentioned earlier, this medium certification program to help vet people so that grieving folks who are seeking out somebody legitimate have a path to go down. So I don't think I answered your question directly, but I had to kind of correct the um, the idea that I am a scientific researcher, because I'm not. I know people in the field. I am science minded. I believe in the scientific process. And I've applied it in some of the things that I do and participated with some of these folks in conducting things. So I don't know if that answers your question. If not, fire again.
It answers it well enough.
Well enough.
Yeah.
Okay, well, good. Well, you've mentioned your father, and we would be remiss if we didn't at least touch on it, because growing up with someone as unique as Dr. Richard Ireland, it surprises me that you consider yourself to be like, you walked away from that whole world and you went the more pragmatic path, but you lived with it your entire life. Was it not super evident to you that this was all legit, or did you think Dad is going crazy?
No, it was. I knew it was legit. I mean, I lived with it day to day. Dad knew everything that was going on. Like my older brother, when he had people buying him beer when he was underage, Dad busted that. When he was drag racing, he busted that. And my brother said to him one day, "How would you like to have a dad like you?"
I would have been in big trouble.
My parents, early in their marriage, and this is just the psychic stuff, but the mediumship stuff was more compelling to me when I saw that. But early in my parents' marriage, my mom was attempting to be a vegetarian for a while, and went a couple months, I think, without eating any meat. But one day she just had this urge to get a burger, and she went out and got this burger and ate it. Came back home, and later that evening, Dad gets back in, and the first words out of his mouth are, "So Shirley, did you enjoy your burger today?" So that's what life was like. Um, but I relished it too, because I saw him touch a lot of people's lives in very positive ways, both healing from maybe loss, just as much like giving people confidence and direction that they needed when they were kind of in a bad spot. So, but I just didn't feel like I was the same person. My dad always said, "Oh, Mark's very psychic." He'd tell people, "Mark's very psychic." I'm like, "Well, I can't do what you do." I didn't really understand what it means to be psychic, because all of us are to some degree. I think it just varies. There's kind of a spectrum for how much people have this ability or don't. Um, but the other thing is, how many of us want to grow up to be our parent? We kind of want to forge our own path and be our own person. And I'm just that my personality is different than my dad's. I'm more reserved, more conservative, maybe, where he was very out there and willing to stick his neck out. And I've become more like that as time's going on. Obviously, for me to get back into this field, write these books, help co-found an organization that now has 31,000 members, where we talk about this stuff and have conferences and all that. I just feel like almost like my purpose in life was to be like I am, so that I could bring a higher level of credibility to all this stuff for the people who are in it for the right reasons and who have the ability, and those who research it. And I'm trying to reach the grassroots level, the average person out there, more than to try and convince hardcore skeptics, because that's a waste of my time. I want to help people.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really, if you're that skeptical, no matter what you say or do, right? Science can't measure what you do or what you talk about. There's no way for it to measure. And it probably, well, maybe, I won't want to say ever, but at some point, maybe they'll be able to measure it. But right now, science, if they can't measure it, it doesn't exist, right? So,
Yeah, you can't weigh it. You can't, see how long it is, that kind of stuff. It's different. But then again, quantum mechanics is different too. And it doesn't, fit the rules of Newtonian physics and all the things we thought we knew. And it's still not understood fully.
Right. No, that's very true. But there's no point talking to a pure skeptic because they've already convinced themselves it doesn't exist and it doesn't matter what you say. You can't convince anyone of anything. But those of us who are curious, who are open to the possibilities, this is where it gets exciting. Your work gets very exciting because you do certify mediums so that people that go to these folks can have a semblance of security in that these folks have been vetted. It's not just some dime store psychic over a crystal ball staying or shaking the table with their legs. Right?
And it's sad that that's so necessary, but there are those people that'll take advantage of people in times of sorrow when they're looking and just desperate to feel some sort of a connection. And then here comes someone and can tell them anything really, and they'll believe it because they want to. So what you guys are doing is fantastic.
Yeah, I started a little over 10 years ago. And it was really in response to when my first book, Soulship, came out. I had people flooding me with emails and stuff asking, oh, who's a good medium I can see? And at that time, I knew a handful, but they were more like celebrity mediums or higher name recognition. They had really long wait lists. Some of them charged a lot because they could, but I knew they were legit. But I thought to myself, there have to be other people that have this ability. They're just not known well. And undiscovered. And that was kind of my idea for putting this together and then taking information from Dr. Emily Williams Kelly of the University of Virginia Division of Perceptual Studies, because I had participated as a sitter in a test experiment she did on some mediums and found out more about her protocols. And then I put kind of a basic plan together, and then I ran those by Tricia Robertson, who's with Scottish Society of Psychical Research. She's become a good friend of mine. She helped me refine those. And then over the 10 years, I've continued to refine and raise the bar again and again to try and get better and better people. But yeah, that was the whole idea behind it. And I think early on, I remember maybe we were maybe a year into passing of our son or past that time. And a therapist friend of ours who their son and our son had been friends, our son who passed, Brandon, she sent another couple to us to talk to them. And she said, well, how did you get through this? And we talked about a lot of different things, but one thing I did touch on is, evidential mediumship. But she got anxious and impatient and was driving by one of these storefront things, like you mentioned. And she went in there and she basically was getting shaken down. What happened? This woman told her some distressing stuff. Oh, your son's stuck. If you can come back, I can remove this spell for $400 and it's a bunch of BS. And so I talked to her again. I said, I told you not to jump into something like that. You need to go to somebody trustworthy. And I did steer her that way, and it was helpful later on. I have a chapter in my new book, Persistence of the Soul, dedicated to helping people know what to look for and where to go so they don't get tricked like that. But in reality, I know there are frauds, but I think I found that there are far more deluded people than there are frauds. There's a lot of people who think, oh, I want to be this, or I am this, and they're really not, or they have just like that much of it, but it's not enough to put them in front of a grieving person. Okay. So that's really where I was coming from, like to separate the wheat from the chaff. So it's a pretty rigorous process.
Yeah, it's a great point. The delusion. That's a strong word. Not that someone's deluded, but rather they want to be something so badly that they believe, or someone has told them, "Oh, you are so psychic," and maybe they just move down that road. It doesn't help anyone, unfortunately. Yeah. But
so how do you separate the wheat from the chaff? Like, what is the process like that for that?
Sure. So what happens is someone will approach me, usually by email, because they've seen the site or heard about it. And they'll say they want to be tested or they want to go through the process to be certified. I then vet them initially just to make sure they're not a trickster or whatever, that they have a website, that they have a practice already established. Because I've tried to do some of the people who are brand new, like, oh, I just took this course, that usually doesn't work very well. It's got to be somebody who's been in practice for a few years. And then I send them a document. The document explains the process, which basically is 5 readings that they have to conduct via Zoom or some other technology without video from someone they don't know. And they only are given the first name of the person at the beginning and no video on, just audio. And then they spend about 10 minutes just giving whatever they get in terms of like, oh, I feel a connection to a young man or whatever. And I think their name is this, and here's some of their favorite hobbies or whatever. And then after that, the sitter would then ask, okay, I want you to focus on a specific person. And this is usually to redirect if they're not gotten anything of substance, or if the sitter just wants more specific information, the sitter could say, I'd like you to connect to John, and please tell me what you can get. And then all this is recorded. And then at the end, the sitter is responsible for transcription, although some of the services now provide a transcription, which saves a lot of time and energy. And then they have to break it into individual statements and grade each statement as either correct, incorrect, or indeterminable. And then additionally, if they get something highly compelling, like, okay, the medium said the name of the young man was Dylan, and that was right, that sitter can award bonus points for hits like that. And I think Dylan's favorite food was pizza with pepperoni, black olives, and onions. Lo and behold, that was correct. I'm going to give you a bonus for that. And we have 2 levels of bonus. One is higher than the other. So the higher one would be the more specific, but that's kind of a subjective thing. It's up to the sitter. But ultimately, we grade for accuracy, like what % accuracy is this reading? And then we add bonus points to that if there are any to be awarded. And there's a threshold of 75 is required to pass. I've had people score in the mid to high 90s, which is a combination of, the % accuracy and any bonus points they get. So not everybody's there. I've had a few just barely speak over, but I had, established those standards, and they exceeded those, so they deserve to pass. In a nutshell, that's how it works.
Gotcha. Can anyone become a sitter?
Yeah, if you'd like to be one, I'd love it, because we get a lot of people that apply for it, but they don't want to do the back end work. And that's the tough part. We need that back end work, and it needs to be done in a thoughtful way. So either people take too long, they never do it, or they don't do it well. But yeah, if you're interested, I'd love to have, because I think people like you would be great at this.
And I was asking for me also, of course, but also there's a lot of people that listen to this show that might be interested in helping you out as well, because everyone who is here right now have a it's not that we're believers, but we at least have a vested interest in coming to the truth and finding the truth. That's what the show's about. So folks that are listening in either already know this is real and would love to help to legitimize it, or are finding out or very curious about it and would be open to learning themselves whether or not they can actually talk to a legit medium.
So what I'm looking for, if someone's interested, I'd love to have you apply. Is somebody who definitely has had someone pass, he's very close to them, there's a loving relationship there. There's got to be that for it to really work. I need somebody who's not brand new in terms of their grief, like it didn't happen 2 weeks ago. They need to be settled down a little bit and go through the grieving process. I would say 3 months at the earliest, typically. And then as somebody who's really balanced in how they look at things, they're open-minded, but they're not going to just say, oh, because they want to feel good, like, oh, that's right, that's right, that's right, for a bunch of general statements. But to be, balanced in their perception, but also not be too hard on the medium. It's you got to kind of be there to like say, okay, that's a reasonable thing, or yeah, that could apply to anybody. I have your grandmother here, and the person's 50 years old. Of course you do.
Right.
So, that's really what I'm looking for, those attributes make a good sitter. And then somebody who's willing to do the back end work, who's detail oriented enough to put it together in a concise way and I give direction on how I want it to come back to me so that it can be graded and hold up. And I have an assistant too. She's a volunteer, but we review those too. And we look at stuff and say, yeah, this is like too generous, or this is too stingy, or, and then we'll go back to the sitter sometimes and say, well, you gave bonus points on this. Why did you do that? It's not clear here. And then because there's no context sometimes for us looking at the paper, so we have to go back and find out. I just read one yesterday that's gave bonus points for something pertaining to hot tea. I'm like, hot tea? So I thought, okay, well, maybe somebody liked hot tea. No, it was actually very specific, because the woman's daughter, I believe, was dying, and this hot tea was a really big deal. She was very thankful to have in the home stretch before she passed and things like that. So hope that helps. So anyone who's interested, just go to my website, markirelandauthor.com, Mark with a K, Ireland like the country, author, markirelandauthor.com. You'll find links there to my certified medium site. And there you'll have, and actually you could write me from either site. There's a contact page on both pages, either the certified medium site or my site. Just write me from there. And there's links to other stuff too, like the Helping Parents Heal organization. So if you're a bereaved parent, you've been through the passing of the child and you're looking for support, go there too. You know, we have 31,000 members worldwide. And this all started just like a little over a decade ago with one location with 30 people. It's exploded. And now we have a conference every other year that draws 1,100 people from around the world, selling out of an entire resort. We have about 165 affiliate chapters worldwide too. So you can meet other people who are going through this and forging friendships and learn about some things, bring hope.
Oh, well, I commend you for that. It's an incredible help to those in need. So thank you for doing that. And Karen, you know now where to go to apply.
I know.
I think you would be perfect. You would be perfect. You're exactly who he's talking about. So I think you should definitely think about it.
That would be great. Yeah.
And so if anyone's out there listening and is interested, he mentioned the website where to go to apply. We'll also add it to our show notes. So all you need to do is go to skepticmetaphysician.com and go to his episode page. You'll see the link directly laid in there, so it's easier for you to reach it. Okay.
Fantastic.
You have a question?
Yeah, I do. So you've had experience with all these mediums and obviously your father, but aside from your father, have you had just a medium that was so accurate that it just blew your mind?
Yeah, a number of them actually. There's a whole chapter in the new book, Persistence of the Soul, that features a reading I had from Tina Powers, who's located in Tucson, Arizona. And it just blew me away. I mean, not only was it full of specific information, but she actually took on the tone and intonation of my son during one of the things she said. It was like, my God, I'm like, felt like I was talking directly to my boy, which is about the most touching thing you could have happen. But yeah, I mean, I could give you some examples of some of the affirmations, but it's interesting too, because, you know, my dad always said, oh, Mark, you're psychic, or my son's psychic. I've actually had these things happen myself, but not often, and only a couple of times. So I kind of got a feel for what it was like. And I'll just give you one that happened with me directly. That's pretty mind blowing. So this Tina Powers I just mentioned, she and I were invited to go for several years in a row to the Golden Gate Spiritualist Church in San Francisco. And I would do a talk and she would give messages to people in the congregation. Now, this is a kind of a little more of a church that's open to these things, and the people want this kind of stuff, you know? So we are preparing to go to this, and she says, hey, Mark, I think you're going to get a message, you know, when we go there, will you share it? I'm like, sure, if I get something, I will, but I didn't really anticipate anything. And she kept bugging me about this over and over. And even to the day we walked in the church door, she's like, hey, Mark, if you get something, will you share it? And I'm like, sure, Tina, I told you I would, I will. Now, this church was founded in 1924 by a woman named Florence Becker, who from my understanding, had abilities very similar to my father. And she passed in, I think, 1970. So that's pertinent to this. So I go into the church, I sit down on a bench to a piano or organ, and I shut my eyes, and I'm just trying to prepare for my talk, just clearing my mind and kind of meditating. And all of a sudden, his name pops into my mind. It's Max. Well, that's interesting, Max. And then immediately Maxine. I thought, oh, maybe it's Maxine, not Max. Now, I didn't hear that. I didn't see it. It just popped in like an idea would come to you. Okay. So then I go do my talk. And at the end, I said, you know, Tina made me promise if I got anything, I would share it with the congregation. So I have to ask, did the names Max or Maxine mean anything to anyone here? And then the church founder, the church pastor, he says, well, Max and Maxine were twins born to the church founder, Florence Becker. They were delivered stillborn, and they grew up on the other side. He says only a few longtime board members even know about this as a secret. And then, so I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, and it's such, I could see why Tina pushed me, because it was such a subtle thing to me. Like I said, that's your imagination, you know, whatever. Then the pastor, after the service, he goes, "I want to show you something." He took me upstairs, showed me a painting. It was a landscape painting that I believe was done by Florence Becker, and it had a long road and then two little figures at the end. He goes, "That's Max and Maxine." So at that moment, I just felt like, okay, now I kind of know what it might feel like when these mediums are telling me stuff that's accurate, what it could be like. Now, maybe it's different for each person. That's kind of what I've discovered. But to get two non-common names and get both of them that are of such pertinence to the founder of this church was wild. So there's an example directly. Now, I'd say, and I've had a lot from mediums over the time. One that was pretty recent that was pretty cool, though. I was meeting this medium for the first time. Her name's Farrah Gibson, and she lives in the Phoenix area. And I was with another medium friend, Michelle Clarenant. I know tons of these people now, and I get these messages from them all the time. But we sit down at dinner, and we're just chatting, and I bring up my son Brandon, who had passed. So I showed Farrah a picture of him, and I said, he was a bass player. And she says, "Okay, he's here. He's butting in." He says, "But his new one had an extra string." So his first bass, which I still have, is a 4-string bass. 4 months before he passed, for his birthday, we got him a new bass with a 5-string bass, which is what he wanted. Talk about an obscure fact. And then she goes, "And he shows me you holding a guitar and taking strings off of it, maybe restringing or something." Day or two before, I'd been in Prescott, Arizona, visiting somebody else I knew. We were walking around downtown to get lunch, and then she led me to a music store. We go in there. I'm like, "Where are we going in here?" She goes, "Oh, I bought this used Martin acoustic guitar, and I want to see if they can string it for me." So she asked the guy, and he says, "Yeah." I said, "I'm a guitar player. You don't need to do that. I'll string it for you." So I bought a set of strings, took it back to her place. I take all the strings off her guitar and restrung it for her. So that Farrah got back. I mean, that's pretty crazy. And these are things that no one even knew at all. So those are recent examples of kinds of things. But going into my books, I give a lot of detailed stuff. I think one of the most compelling ones I had is actually in chapter 1 of the new book, because it involves something from a medium where I served as like a proxy sitter. That is, I had no direct connection to the person who had passed. I was like an intermediary. What had happened was this friend from work, I was in Phoenix, she was in Sacramento. She reached out to me by email and said, "I need to talk to you right away. My brother just died." And I replied back and said, I'll have to contact you later. I'm busy right now. And ironically, that afternoon, I'd set up a meeting with Deborah Martin, who's another medium. And my purpose for meeting with her was to review my dad's book, which I later discovered, unbeknownst to me, a manuscript that was unpublished that I later got published. But she felt she had connected with my father, and there was some information that he wanted to convey to me through her about how this book should be presented. And a lot of it ended up in the introduction and preface. So anyhow, back to the story of the friend. The friend in Sacramento, writes to me, "My brother died on a motorcycle crash. He died instantly." That's all I knew, just that. I said, "Look, I'll get back to you later. I can't right now." So I worked for like half a day in the office. I got in my car, started driving to Deborah Martin's house, the medium. And I called Linda on the way and just said, "Hey, so sorry to hear this. I'll get back to you, when I'm done. I have another meeting." But, she said she was really having a tough time. Her brother was her best friend, and reiterated that he died in this motorcycle crash, and that she said he was hit and killed instantly. So that's all I knew. So I get to Deborah's. I'm like, "Hey, this is really strange that I'm here on this day, because a friend of mine that works in another office reached out to me because her brother just died." And she goes, "Well, it's no accident. I need to talk to her." I'm like, "Okay." I said, "You want me to call her now?" She goes, "No, let's do it later. Let's do what we plan to do first, and then we'll come back to that." So we sat down, went through this book stuff and did all that. I said, "Okay, now do you want to have me call her now?" And she goes, "I don't have enough time right now because I can pick up my daughter from school, but why don't you and I sit down? I'll just see if I can get what I can get." So she took a pad of paper and a pen, sat with me in one chair and her next to me. And she says, what's your friend's name?" I said, "Linda." She goes, "What's the brother's name?" I said, "I don't know." And that's all I gave her. And within seconds, she's like, "Oh, this involved a motorcycle accident. This man was killed instantly." He wants her to know that his soul left his body immediately and he did not suffer at all. And then she started giving me stuff I didn't know. Like, that's all I knew. She goes, showing me like a red ribbon or something, like maybe it went over his casket. And he's also showing me, he says, the little kids, something about the little kids, and then a bath time or a bathtub with the little kids. And then some other things, but that's what I remember right now. Anyhow, so I'm finishing up. I said, okay, well, I'll give you her number so you can reach out to her later today. And Deborah did call her later and finished giving her a full reading, which was phenomenal. But so I'm driving back after this, and I said, hey, Linda, my friend Deborah, she's a medium. She just gave me this information. She got the fact that your brother died instantly and that he didn't suffer, and he didn't tell her that, how he had died. And I said, she said something about a red ribbon. Was there a red ribbon that went over his coffin or anything? And she goes, yeah, his motorcycle buddies bought a red banner or ribbon that went over top of his casket. And then she said also, he said something about the little kids. And she said, oh yeah, my brother had suffered through a period of drug abuse and we had to basically take his children in for a while. And we literally called them the little kids. And their favorite I said, well, was something to do with baths? Their favorite activity was bath time. They'd have water wars where they'd see toy boats and all this stuff. So, and there were other things that she told me, I just can't remember right now, that were also accurate. And then, she'd call Linda later that night with more information like, thank you for changing the music at my service from country western to hard rock, because he hated country western. He loved hard rock. So that's an example of pretty extraordinary mediumship where they didn't even have direct communication with anyone that knew any of this stuff. So she wasn't reading my mind because I didn't have any of that first, and you had no one knowing anything. So I just say that's a pretty good example of solid evidential mediumship.
I would say so.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So it sounds like most of these people that you are talking about have been conscious mediums. But have you done anything with trance mediums?
Actually, my dad had that ability. So I'm in possession of a bunch of trance work that he did over 30 years. Now, he had this class where people would sit, and they were more like teaching lectures, and there was no money exchanged. It was just a free thing for people who wanted more of that kind of teaching. It was philosophical, light direction kind of teaching. It was along the lines, like if you're reading some of the teachings from the Beatitudes in the New Testament, it's more like that kind of feel to it, the Sermon on the Mount stuff, but not exactly, but it felt like that, and I think I've attended, one other trance medium. I don't even remember her name. It's been quite a while, but not many of the mediums today do that type of approach where they're going into a deep trance. One person I know who does it, who's really a highly respected and legitimate medium, is Suzanne Giesler. She's actually a former, high-ranking naval official.
A colonel in the Marines or something like that.
We never, way, way up there, but she never would have even thought of something like this. She knew nothing about any of this stuff until her her stepdaughter was struck by lightning and killed, and she was like 8 months pregnant, so the baby died too. And she got pulled into this, and it was kind of an innate natural ability for her. And she's very level-headed, very down to earth. Anybody who thinks she's not woo at all, but she does this stuff and she's very accurate, and does the trance mediumship stuff too. In fact, I have to credit her because in our organization, Helping Parents, we used the term, bereaved parents. She encouraged us to change it to shining light parents, or making the shifting from being a bereaved parent to a shining light parent, meaning, more hopeful and living life fully and full of joy and hope, as opposed to just being down in a hole for the rest of your life.
Right. Yeah. It's funny. We actually have an outreach to Suzanne, see if she'll come on the show. So hopefully she'll say yes, and we'll have her.
Well, I'm talking to her on Friday, so I'll nudge her.
That would be wonderful. Yeah, I listened to her story on another show, and I thought she'd be perfect to come on the show. Mm. So, and I wasn't going to surprise you with her, but hey, cat's out of the bag.
No, that's all right. That's exciting.
Yeah, it is. Gosh, I don't know which direction to head in.
I've tied your tongue.
Yes, you did.
So, well, I have a question, kind of getting back to the certification. Do you have like a lot of people that don't make the cut?
Yeah. And really that's an important thing to consider because, I want the best, or at least people who can prove that they have this at a specific level or higher, then that should be the case. So I would say right now, 15 to 20% may be passing.
Okay.
Wow. Okay.
That's good.
Yeah, that's encouraging.
Yeah.
Yeah, on both sides of the coin, that many are passing, but also that few are passing because then it's been more discerning. So,
Yeah.
well, now, if someone wanted to access those, is there a list somewhere that you have that people can, if they're in need of a legit medium, can find these folks?
Yeah, back to my website, there's a link right on it, that they can easily find at the certified medium page. So rather than give you 4 or 5, URLs, just go to my page, markirelandauthor.com, and you'll find a link to Helping Parents Heal, a link to the certified medium site, link to videos of my dad on the Steve Allen show in 1971 doing a psychic demonstration that's really cool. And a lot of other stuff too. I got a media page there with some of my other interviews, a documentary. I was on Discovery Channel with a medium, at the University of Arizona. So there's all kinds of interesting stuff there for people. But just go to that one site to find links to all the others.
All right.
Sounds great.
Okay. Like,
I'll be there.
no, I believe me too, and I know exactly what you're thinking about. So, well, so you have had some sparks of psychicness yourself, and of course, your father is a very well renowned psychic medium. Anyone else in your family, or is it just kind of the two of you?
No, the people that research this have found it does run in family lines. So whether it's a genetic thing or a socialization thing, I'm not sure. Maybe a combination, but my dad's brother, Robert, he also was very psychic and also a medium. He had a church in Tucson. He passed a number of years ago, but he was actually the first person I went to after my son died. And I was looking for some connection. And it was like 3 days after his passing that my uncle and I connected when I was in the mortuary. My cell phone, we connected, and we didn't know the cause of death at the time. And he's like, Mark, I'm going to let you know that I tried to connect last night. I tried to meditate, but I couldn't get anything. But this morning I was doing my meditation and your dad came to me and he wanted you to know that he was there for Brandon when Brandon transitioned and that Brandon was a little confused, but your dad helped him adjust. Brandon wanted you to know that you're the best parents he ever could have had, which is the nice, warm, fuzzy thing we like to hear. But then he gave you the evidence. He said, your dad said Brandon's death was caused by a lack of oxygen in his bloodstream that caused his heart to fail. 2 days later, I got the autopsy results. The physician called me and said, your son's death was caused by a severe asthma attack, drove his blood oxygen level down and caused cardiac arrest. So we didn't know the cause of death beforehand. So yeah, my uncle had that. And he was really maybe the catalyst for me getting reinterested in the field and back into my dad's world. My grandmother, my dad's mom, also became a trance medium. This was later in life, but she had that ability innately. And my granddad's grandfather's side, I guess he used to read tea leaves and stuff like that. But I think as my dad grew up as a kid, this was not embraced by his dad at all. And he was kind of rebellious about it because of like, hey, I'm not being respected or whatever. But it was when he was a young kid, like as my grandmother said, even starting at age 3, they could tell that he had this to some degree. They were in rural Ohio, didn't have a telephone or anything, and he'd say, "Grandpa's coming," and then Grandpa would be there within a certain period of time. It was very quick, and they actually started planning meals for when my dad would say, "Grandpa's coming." And one time he said, "Grandpa's coming, but he'll have shaved his beard off." And his brothers are like, "Oh, you're crazy." And they called him Crazy Dick, "You're crazy, Crazy Dick. There's no way. Grandpa loves the beard. He'd never shave it off." Grandpa gets there, it's shaved off. It's like, or he'd been making taffy and the beard got dipped in the taffy, so he had to shave it off.
Oh,
So
wow.
anyhow, it did run in the family.
Yeah.
Yeah, generational.
Absolutely.
I love it.
Yeah. Now you mentioned your son, and I've been meaning to come back to this question because as a grieving father, I would think the first thing I would do is I would want to have as much contact with my past son as possible. Besides your uncle, was there any other interactions that you've had with your son since his passing?
Oh yeah, a bunches, but I'd say the first one was maybe even before my uncle. I can't remember because it's been a while now, but I wanted a direct connection. And so I went into a darkened room, which is actually a walk-in closet, shut the door, and tried to get into a meditative state. And I just thought, let me know, give me a connection of some sort. And I sat there, and within a short period of time, I saw my son smiling face, like it's scrolling across my mind's eye, and he was like glowing, and I could feel joy and peace and like this joy sense. And that feels really good. But then right after that, I got this symbol, which was a cross with an oval loop at the top. And I'd seen people wear those, but I didn't really know what they were. So I had to actually go Google it. I found out it's an Ankh. It's the oldest cross in human history, dating back maybe 5,000 years to ancient Egypt. And the lower portion represents physical life, and the oval loop represents eternal life. So I got a puzzle to solve, which really satisfied me as a more analytical type person, where I had to go see, what is this? What does that mean? And it gave me meaning that that really touched me. And I felt like that was the first of, turned out to be a number of connections. Another one I had, now this is a year and a half later. I went to bed one night and I asked for a dream visit, and I asked to remember it, like in a prayerful way. I asked to be able to remember. And that night I had the most vivid dream I'd ever had in my life. It was like more real than waking reality. And he's sitting there in this room. It's a 3-walled white room, and where the fourth wall should be is infinity. It's like the rest of the universe. It was strange. It was like a place to meet in the middle between the two realms, it seemed. And it was a very short chat. The chat isn't what's most important. What was is that feeling and the connection and the love. But what really made this more compelling in terms of knowing was real, a woman reached out to me just within the last year, and she had read my first book, Soulship, where I tell the story of that dream visit. And she said, I had the same experience, but I wasn't sure whether to believe it. And then I turned to page, 128 of Soulship, and I read this. She says her son who had died was in a 3-wall white room in the middle where the fourth wall should have been was infinity. And she met her son in the exact same way. So she then knew it was real. And for me, it was just icing on the cake.
Right. Absolutely.
Wow.
And that's not to mention all the medium readings I had. First book, Soul Shift, I document 4 of those that were done, and the high degree of accuracy and the very specific stuff, like how he died and things that he liked to do and hobbies and things like that. And then there was just so many other things. It's been a lot of years. So, I mean, I've been very gifted that way. I think there's a lot of parents have suffered and maybe haven't had that kind of a blessing that I've had, that it helped so much. And at this stage, I don't even ask for that stuff, but I still get it. Whether it be through a medium friend or just like a feeling or something like that. But, I think some people too, they may get signs or something like that, but they don't recognize them. Either they're just dismissing it as like, okay, I'm just imagining that, or that's not significant. And other people do the other. They're like, everything is a sign.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
So, but I think we're open to that and saying, really, this is something beyond coincidence. Give it some credence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Depends on the day. Yeah, it could go either way. So yeah, that makes
That's
sense. Yeah. Well, Mark, you've given us so many reasons for someone to visit your site, whether it's helping parents heal, or the list of legit mediums, or there's so many different things on your platform that would be of huge benefit for those folks that are listening or watching right now. Mm-hmm. One last time, give us that website so people can write it down.
Sure. And the books too, for somebody who's not familiar with this stuff or looking for like, what is the evidence? It's in those books. It's markirelandauthor.com, Mark with a K, Ireland like the country, author, markirelandauthor.com.
All right.
And can they get the books on your website, or are they on Amazon, or how can they get those books?
They're on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, but I have links to them on my site. So once again, if they just go there, they'll find the links directly to the books on whichever platform they want to buy them from.
Right. And a little trick I found was when I was researching him, I found that you actually have a bonus free chapter on your site. So
I do. Yeah. In fact, it was the chapter I was mentioning, the Tina Powers reading. So I put that one on there just to give people a sample so they could taste it and see if they want to read more.
Absolutely. And if you pay attention, future episode, I might just read that chapter out there. So, because I found it fascinating. So we'll be in touch. Mark, thank you so much for coming on. If you didn't get that website, just go to skepticmetaphysician.com. You can find the links directly laid in there. So it's easy for you to connect. But this has been wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for what you're doing.
Yes.
It's a much needed service for the world, and we salute you. So thanks for coming on and being so wonderful.
I appreciate you giving me a platform to share that with people. So thank you.
All right. Well, we'll see you again soon.